September 14, 1936. 2:37 a.m. Marcus the Blade Williams woke up with a canvas bag over his head and his hands tied behind his back. His head was pounding. His mouth tasted like copper and chemicals, chloroform. Someone had drugged him. He tried to move, but his body was pressed against metal, cold, vibrating. He was in the back of a truck, moving fast. The engine roared. Tires hitting potholes made his body bounce against the truck bed. Marcus tried to remember. He'd been at Rosa's bar on 47th Street, drinking whiskey, playing cards. It was after midnight. He'd been winning. Then someone tapped his shoulder. A woman's voice. "Someone wants to buy you a drink." He turned around. That's the last thing he remembered. Now he was here, bound, blind, being driven somewhere. The truck stopped. The engine cut off. Silence. Marcus heard footsteps. Multiple people. The truck gate opened with a metallic screech. Hands grabbed him. Rough, strong, dragged him out. His feet hit gravel. Someone yanked the bag off his head. The first thing Marcus saw was fog. Thick, grey, rolling across the ground like water. The second thing he saw was tombstones, hundreds of them, rows and rows disappearing into the mist. Woodlawn Cemetery, one of the oldest in Harlem. The third thing he saw was Bumpy Johnson. Bumpy stood 10 feet away, wearing a black suit, black tie, black fedora. His face was calm, empty. No anger, no emotion, just cold, calculating silence. Behind Bumpy stood 6 men, all armed, all watching Marcus, like wolves watching wounded prey. Marcus's legs went weak. He knew exactly why he was here. "Bumpy, listen," Marcus started, his voice cracking. "I can explain." Bumpy didn't respond. He walked forward slowly, his shoes crunching on the gravel path. He stopped 3 feet from Marcus. Their eyes met. 6 months ago, Bumpy said quietly, "You stabbed my brother 7 times on Lenox Avenue. You left him bleeding on the sidewalk like a dog." He was 22 years old. Marcus tried to speak, but nothing came out. Bumpy continued, "I've been looking for you. Everywhere. Boston, Philadelphia, Baltimore. You ran like a coward. But you came back to Harlem 2 weeks ago. Big mistake." One of Bumpy's men stepped forward, holding a shovel. He threw it at Marcus's feet. It landed with a dull thud on the grass. "Pick it up," Bumpy said. Marcus stared at the shovel, then at Bumpy, then at the grave markers surrounding them. "What?" "Pick it up." Marcus's hands were shaking so badly, he could barely grip the handle. He lifted the shovel. It felt like it weighed 100 pounds. Bumpy pointed to a spot, 20 feet away. Open ground. No graves. Just grass and dirt. "Start digging." Marcus didn't move. His mind was racing. This couldn't be happening. This had to be a nightmare. He'd wake up and none of this would be real. But it was real. The cold air, the fog, the weight of the shovel in his hands. Bumpy Johnson's empty, merciless stare. "I said dig." Marcus walked to the spot on trembling legs. He looked down at the grass, then at Bumpy. "How deep?" Bumpy's expression didn't change. "Deep enough for a man." Marcus understood. He was digging his own grave. To understand why Bumpy Johnson made Marcus Williams dig his own grave, you need to understand what Marcus had taken from him. Not just a life, a brother. Willie Johnson was born in 1914, 12 years after Bumpy. He was the youngest of 3 siblings. Their sister Margaret was the middle child. Bumpy was the oldest and the protector. Willie looked up to Bumpy, followed him everywhere as a kid, wanted to be just like him. Bumpy didn't want Willie in the streets. He wanted Willie to be different, better, clean. Bumpy sent Willie to school, paid for his books. made sure he graduated. By 1935, Willie was working as a bookkeeper for a legitimate Harlem business. Numbers, accounting, legal work. Willie wasn't in the game. He wasn't a gangster. He was just a young man trying to make an honest living. But on March 3, 1936, Willie made a mistake. He walked into a gambling house on 32nd Street, just to watch, maybe play one hand of poker. He'd saved up $30 from his paycheck, thought he'd try his luck. The gambling house was run by Dutch Schultz's organization. Schultz controlled most of Harlem's illegal gambling at the time, and he was in direct competition with Bumpy Johnson for territory. Willie sat down at a poker table. He was nervous, didn't know the rules well, but he got lucky. Very lucky. One hand after hand. By midnight he'd turned his $30 into $300. He cashed out, took his winnings, walked out happy. But one of Schultz's enforcers, Marcus the Blade Williams, noticed something. Willie looked like Bumpy. Same build, same walk, same eyes. Marcus followed Willie outside, stopped him on Lenox Avenue under a streetlight. "You Bumpy's brother?" Willie froze. "Yeah, why?" Marcus didn't answer. He pulled a knife, 7 inches, serrated edge. "Tell Bumpy that Schultz runs these streets now." Willie tried to run. Marcus was faster. The first stab hit Willie in the back, the second in the side, the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, followed in rapid succession. Willie collapsed on the sidewalk. Marcus walked away calmly, disappeared into the night. A woman found Willie 15 minutes later. He was still breathing. Barely. She screamed for help. Someone ran to get Bumpy. Bumpy arrived 10 minutes later. Willie was still alive. Blood everywhere. His eyes open, trying to speak. Bumpy knelt down, held his brother's head. I'm here, Willie." Willie's lips moved, barely audible. "Marcus Williams, Schultz's man." Those were Willie's last words. He died in Bumpy's arms at 1:47 a.m. on March 4, 1936. Bumpy didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't rage. He just sat there, holding his brother's body while the crowd gathered, silent, still, empty. But inside, something changed. Something cold and final clicked into place. Marcus Williams had just signed his death warrant. He just didn't know it yet. The next morning, Bumpy held a meeting with his top men, 8 of them, all loyal, all capable. "Find Marcus Williams. I don't care how long it takes. Find him." Marcus had fled Harlem within hours of the killing. He knew what would happen if he stayed. Bumpy Johnson didn't forgive, didn't forget. Marcus went to Boston first, stayed with a cousin. But Bumpy's network reached everywhere. Word got back. Marcus ran again. Philadelphia, then Baltimore, then Washington, D.C. Always moving, always looking over his shoulder. 6 months. Marcus thought he'd gotten away, thought maybe Bumpy had moved on, thought maybe he was safe. So he came back to Harlem, just for a few days, to see a woman he'd been involved with, to get some money he'd left behind. Big mistake. Within 48 hours Bumpy knew Marcus was back. One of Bumpy's men spotted him at Rosa's bar. Bumpy didn't rush. He planned. September 13th, 1936. Bumpy sent a woman Marcus knew to Rosa's bar. She sat down next to him, flirted, bought him drinks, kept buying drinks. By 2 a.m. Marcus was drunk and happy. The woman suggested they go somewhere private. Marcus agreed. They walked out to the alley behind the bar. That's when 4 of Bumpy's men grabbed him, a chloroform-soaked rag over his face. Marcus struggled for 5 seconds, then went limp. They put him in the truck, drove him to Woodlawn Cemetery, and now Marcus stood in the cemetery, holding a shovel, staring at the ground he was supposed to dig. He pushed the blade into the soil. It was hard, compact. He had to use his foot to force it down. He lifted the first shovelful of dirt. threw it aside. Then another, then another. Bumpy watched in silence, didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. Marcus dug for an hour. His hands started bleeding. Blisters formed, then burst. His back ached, his shoulders burned. The hole was 2 feet deep. Keep digging, Bumpy said. Marcus dug for another hour. The hole was now 4 feet deep. He was standing in it, his clothes soaked with sweat, his hands raw meat. Bumpy, please, Marcus gasped. I'm sorry, I didn't know he was your brother. I swear, Schultz told me to send a message. I was just following orders. Bumpy's face didn't change. Keep digging. Marcus dug for another hour. The hole was 6 feet deep. He could barely lift the shovel anymore. Every movement was agony. He looked up. Bumpy was still standing there, still watching. The 6 men behind him hadn't moved. It's deep enough, Marcus said, his voice broken. Please. I have a family. I have a daughter. Please. Bumpy finally moved. He walked to the edge of the grave, looked down at Marcus covered in dirt and blood and sweat. Willie had a family too. Me, my sister, my mother. You took him from us. I know, and I'm sorry. I'll do anything, anything. Bumpy reached into his coat. Marcus's heart stopped, but Bumpy didn't pull out a gun. He pulled out a photograph. He held it over the grave. You see this? This is Willie, at his high school graduation. He was going to be something. He was going to make our mother proud. And you stabbed him 7 times and left him to die. Bumpy dropped the photograph. It fluttered down into the grave, landed at Marcus's feet. Climb out, Bumpy said. Marcus stared up at him, confused. What? I said, climb out. Marcus grabbed the edge of the grave, pulled himself up. His arms barely had strength left. He collapsed on the grass next to the hole he'd just dug. Bumpy's men stepped forward, lifted Marcus to his feet, held him. Bumpy walked closer, face to face with the man who'd killed his brother. You're going to remember this night for the rest of your life. However long that is. You dug your own grave. You stood in it. You felt what it's like to know death is coming. Bumpy pulled a razor from his pocket, the same razor he'd carried since he was 6, the one he'd used on dozens of men who'd crossed him. Willie died with 7 stab wounds. So you're going to carry 7 scars. Marcus tried to pull away, but the men held him tight. Bumpy cut him, once across the left cheek. The blade was so sharp, Marcus didn't feel it at first. Then the blood came, hot, flowing. Another cut, right forearm. Another on the left shoulder, 4 more. Strategic, painful. Not fatal, but permanent. 7 cuts, 7 scars, 1 for each time Marcus had stabbed Willie. When Bumpy was finished, he stepped back. Marcus was conscious but broken, blood running down his face and arms. You're going to leave Harlem tonight, Bumpy said. You're never coming back. If I see you again, if I hear your name again, I won't make you dig. I'll just put you in the ground. Do you understand? Marcus nodded, couldn't speak, just nodded. Bumpy's men let him go. Marcus collapsed again, lay there in the grass next to the grave he'd dug, the grave that should have been his. Get him out of here, Bumpy said. 2 men picked Marcus up, threw him in the back of the truck, drove him to the edge of Harlem, dumped him on the street. Marcus Williams left New York that night, took a train west, ended up in California, changed his name, never returned. He lived until 1964, 28 more years, but everyone who knew him said he was never the same after that night. The scars on his face and arms were constant reminders. 7 scars, for 7 stab wounds, for 1 murdered brother. Bumpy Johnson never spoke about that night publicly, but word spread. The story became legend. The night Bumpy made his brother's killer dig his own grave. It wasn't about brutality. It was about justice, about making a man understand the weight of what he'd done, about making him feel the fear that Willie had felt bleeding out on a sidewalk. Some people said Bumpy should have killed Marcus, that letting him live was weakness, but those people didn't understand. Death would have been mercy. Making Marcus live with what he'd done, with those scars, with the memory of standing in his own grave. That was punishment. Bumpy had his revenge, and Harlem understood. You don't kill a Johnson, you don't spill Johnson blood, because Bumpy won't just kill you, he'll make you wish he had. The grave Marcus dug was filled in the next day. Bumpy's men covered it up, planted grass, seed. Within a year you couldn't tell it had ever been there. But Bumpy remembered. He visited Woodlawn Cemetery every year on the anniversary of Willie's death, stood at Willie's real grave, paid his respects, and sometimes, late at night when no one was watching, he'd walk to that spot, the spot where Marcus had dug, where a killer had stood in his own grave, and learned what justice really means. Bumpy Johnson died in 1968, 32 years after Willie's death. He's buried in Woodlawn Cemetery, same cemetery where he made Marcus dig. Willie's grave is nearby. The brothers rest 50 yards apart, together again, and somewhere in California, Marcus Williams lived out his days carrying 7 scars and 1 terrible memory. The night Bumpy Johnson made him dig his own grave.